Hello and welcome, live and direct from the fantastic Eco Motive in Bristol, a fantastic self-build project. But we're here today to hear Ed Gemmel, who I heard in Parliament Square, fantastically telling us about the new climate party. Very exciting, new party on the British political landscape, and they're really looking to shake things up and get climate really in the crosshairs of more debate and more MPs getting involved in things. So, without too much further ado, Ed, tell us about the Climate Party and some of your plans. Over.
Brilliant. Right. Well, great to see everybody here tonight. And a big thank you to all of you for what you do to start off with. So we need a massive movement of us all doing this to get anywhere. In a minute, I'm actually going to put on a film, which will probably be quite long for these kind of things. It's approaching 30 minutes, but it will actually be telling you all about the Climate Party anyway, and talking about the Uxbridge by-election, and will involve a couple of other quite sort of notable people in climate. So people know George Marshall from Climate Outreach and Rupert Reed, who was originally Extinction Rebellion, now the Climate Majority Project. So I'll put that on in a minute and then almost go to questions afterwards. So during the film, please note anything you want to ask a question on and then ask it afterwards, because it probably will raise quite a few questions. Intro to me generally, then a brief intro to the film, and then I'll put it on. So I'm Ed Gemmel. So I'm now the leader of the Climate Party in the UK. You'll hear a lot about it in the film, but we launched on the 5th of September last year, officially, same day as Liz Truss took office. So we've already outlasted one prime minister, maybe outlasting another one very soon, which is a good, a good couple of thresholds. I'm also the managing director of Scientists Warning Europe. Scientists Warning Europe is the European arm that represents the tens of thousands of scientists who signed the 4 great warnings to humanity. So the World Scientists Warning to Humanity in 1992, the World Scientists Warning to Humanity, a second notice 25 years later on, because we ignored the first lot. And then the World Scientists Warning of a Climate Emergency in 2019. And we issued at COP26 the World Scientists Warnings into Action paper. The reason these are so important is they're multiply signed by thousands of scientists. In between ones are actually the most endorsed scientific papers in the world. So if you haven't actually seen them, you should be. One is almost 20,000 signatures now, and one's nearly 12,000. Then I'm an independent councillor in Buckinghamshire on the Unitary Council. So effectively the highest level of local government that exists, because the district and county councils are pushed together. And I was elected in a deeply conservative ward that had never had anything but conservatives. And my only policy was Climate Action Now. That's all I had on my leaflet and all I talked about, apart from local issues. But there was nothing else on the leaflet apart from Ed Gemmel's a good bloke and Climate Action Now and why we needed it. And in this deeply conservative ward, I came second, pushing 2 conservatives into 3rd and 4th, and got my place on the council. And I'm also parish councillor in Hazelmere, which is my ward, where we've declared a climate emergency and set a 2030 target, which is pretty tough work for any of you that are in places that have set 2030 targets. I stood in the Uxbridge by-election. We also had a candidate standing in Selby, and that was a fairly brutal experience, which you're going to see in the film that's coming up, with a lot of stuff about what we do. So I won't repeat anymore or say any more about it. The film itself is not made by the Climate Party or for the Climate Party. So as I introduce Phoenix to the director-producer who created it, so the director-producer is an ex-BBC director-producer, Peter Armstrong. I suppose in terms of being famous, it's Songs of Praise. For those of us who are of the right age may actually know, he was one of the original people working on that, worked on a lot of other projects. So he and his wife, Anuradha, created it. So it's their piece of work, not ours. Okay, so, and that's both saying that in terms of disclaimer kind of thing, but also to say that it's not us trying to shove, what we believe down the throats of everybody. It's somebody independent who's looking at it, and they bring in 3 or 4 other voices into it at the same time. Right, and it's reasonably long, as I say, for this kind of event, but it's sort of in place of me talking. You're going to get me talking with different settings and a few other interesting people as well. Then I'll answer anybody's questions on everything. Right. Now, am I putting this on, or are you, Phoenix? If I am,
I think we need to share screen and make you a co-host.
Right.
In the participants, and so we'll just make you a co-host there, and then if you share your get it playing in one of the things, and then share your screen. You're now a co-host.
Okay, thank you.
So
right. So if I go to share, oh, hang on, I've got to also get the volume. Where do we get the sound on? How do we do that? So I go to share screen first.
Share screen first. Put it on maximum on your computer.
Right.
Probably on the film itself. It's on YouTube or something.
Okay, so I've got it on pause. Now.
Great to see Edinburgh beaming in, just to say that. Edinburgh Climate Action Network. Lovely.
Right, okay, so it's that. Okay, so can you now see my screen?
It says Ed Gemmel. Yes, yep.
It's come up, right. I'm going to play, how do we get the, right, oh, and then the, sorry, where, the volume's at the top, isn't it? Where is it?
I put volume
sound
on Vimeo and on your computer.
So I'm just going to start with the music, then I'm going to immediately stop it, just so everyone can tell me it's working.
Yeah.
Right, brilliant. Now I'm going to get it up onto the full size and things. Oh, sorry, not sure what happened. I think I hit it by mistake.
Thursday, the 20th of July, is shaping up to be a super by-election Thursday in Uxbridge and South Ruislip. The then Prime Minister Boris Johnson won the seat at the 2019.
Great. Thanks, Steph. That's brilliant. Hello. Hi, Ed. And I'm going to stand as the candidate here.
Ed Gemmel must have known the scale of the challenge faced by his fledgling climate party, but he could hardly have guessed that this by-election would unleash a political firestorm, one that could threaten the future of Britain's support for the whole green agenda. What galvanised Ed into starting the Climate Party was a dream about his two sons.
In my dream, they're adults, and they're returning back to our semi-detached house in Buckinghamshire in their army uniforms. So camouflage trousers on, so army kit, army bags, berets. And they come in, they open the door, and they dump their army bags down in the living room. And then they come in to find me having a coffee just in the next room. And they say, Papa, we've just come back from Europe where we're shooting people to stop them getting the drinking water. They say to me that they could be shot, they could be killed, but they've got great equipment. The British Army's given them great flak jackets, and they've got big guns, and they're shooting the poorer people who have smaller guns to stop them getting the drinking water, so that you, Papa, and other people in Britain can continue to live in the luxury lifestyles you've enjoyed for the previous decades. And then they say to me, and they point at me and they say, Papa, you knew about this, didn't you, 20 years ago, and what did you do about it? And that's the point where I start waking up, and I've got tears coming down my cheek, and I'm mouthing words, and the words I'm mouthing, no sound's coming out, and I'm mouthing, but I've got a mortgage, but I've got a job, but I've got to look after you. And then in my mind, and then I just spoke out loud and said, oh, fuck that just doesn't wash. And I just turned around, I put my feet on the ground, and I went, I just have to work on climate change from now on to try and stop the crisis. And as I got up to walk to the door in the bedroom, in my mind I was thinking, better to be a poor man or a beggar on the streets of a world that survives and is stable, rather than be trying to become a rich man in a world that is disappearing. And then I just worked on climate from then. And then I became an immediate sponge for all of that information that I'd been ignoring for the period before. So all the scientific information, and I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, I didn't realize there was so much information out there about it. And it was particularly the world scientists' warning to humanity. And I was absolutely struck by the fact, how is it possible that I'm acting like I am or have been for the previous years, and yet 15,000 scientists have told us we need urgent action and we should have done it yesterday?
Yes, I mean, if you look at the chart here, you see the red, the extreme heating of the Earth. So Ed is quite correct in focusing with the Climate Party on climate as a single issue. This is the foundation of life on Earth. Just look at what's happening to the world at the moment. Fires across America.
Beat the horn, Dad, beat the horn. What the fuck, dude? Beat the horn, beat the horn.
We see the same across Africa, North Africa baking, Spain, they've experienced record flooding along with intense heat. India, record monsoons, people are dying. Same across China, same in Japan. So it's a global phenomenon. I don't think it's possible to ignore that the Earth is changing. And I think you can take it as a prognosis of this is what is going to happen within the United Kingdom in the future.
Faced with this evidence, Ed decided to found a new political party, the Climate Party. It would be focused entirely on the climate issue, but from a centre-right point of view.
We've got it now. So now we're going to the council offices to hand in the papers and get ourselves registered for the by-election. Now meeting actually with my agent. So Wisdom here is the agent from the Climate Party. So it's his job to actually make sure that this is all tickety-boo and legal, and that we actually hand it in on time and we pay our £500 deposit as well.
Speaking of on time,
so,
let's go.
Let's go. Right. See you out in a minute. Hopefully successfully done. Our first election for the Climate Party. We're here, we're off the mark. Let's go. Hooray!
The writer and climate campaigner George Marshall had long come to the same conclusion: the urgent need to take the climate message well beyond the usual left-wing bubble.
I was at the Glasgow Climate Summit, and I went to a very interesting event. I still write in the notebooks from it, called the Global Conservative Climate Summit, because I am very interested in having a conversation with conservatives. And I met Ed there, and I was very interested by his dynamism and by his interest in particular in talking politically to people of more conservative values. I had not found anybody before who was interested in doing that in the way that he was. The thing which excited me about the project was that it would specifically be speaking to the centre-right. And that is the real need in the political spectrum. We do not need anybody else on the left speaking to climate change. We already have the Green Party. We have a lot of people in the Labour Party, although it's losing its way on this, who are very concerned on climate change. We need people who are speaking better to the centre-right, saying, yes, we speak to your values, we speak to your concerns, and who can generate a collective narrative of a more conservative mindset on it. And this centre-right audience, this is the missing piece, I think, and the big political opportunity.
And the idea is that the majority of people, so that's 60%, and I sort of divide it, and you're probably 20% left, 20% right, and we're really, in this country, about 60% probably in the middle, what I call the central ground. And it's focusing really on what matters to them. So what are we doing? I mean, it's the first thing is to make sure we bring forward the target for net zero, so to get it to a realistic target, both scientifically and from the point of view of us making money in the UK. Because if we stay with the 2050 target, we go behind everybody else. We end up basically outsourcing everything that we're doing rather than doing it locally. So if we want to get the jobs and the opportunities here, we need to bring forward the target and lead the whole thing.
The actual canvassing process is in itself a form of large-scale public engagement. Using the Climate Party and using the election as a hook that can say, we're coming to talk to you about this, but this is important, and we would like your vote. But actually bringing in some of the ideas that have been developed, in particular in the US, with deep canvassing, of going and talking to people who normally are not engaged on an issue, for in this case, not engaged with climate change, reaching out actively to people who are normally ignored, because whether they vote for the party or not, I think having the conversation, a respectful, listening conversation of hearing people's views, is a very powerful means to social change.
So here we are in front of a storm here, and it's pretty topical because we've just had 6 months of rainfall dropping in 36 hours in Italy. We've had floods in China, India, Japan, all over the world, the USA as well today, and people are talking about climate change isn't causing a problem for us. Come on, let's get real and let's get the job done. Noha.
Noha, nice to meet
Ed,
you.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys.
So, and if you guys want to come out helping us, we're going to go out campaigning this weekend, because I'm running, delivering all my leaflets. So if you want to come for a couple of hours running, while we run and put them into doors and chat to people, then we can do a running team and we can run around at the weekend for a couple of hours. And then we can post about it as well. Here in Uxbridge, on our campaign trail, been running all day, just delivered a whole load of leaflets into this complex of flats here, trying to say to everybody that we exist and saying to them as well that a vote for the Labour and Conservative parties gets us nowhere, won't change what's happening in government, whereas a vote for the Climate Party will make a statement to those parties that they need to take more action on climate, more action on the environment if they want to get votes in the future. At COP26, I was in a meeting of the Conservative Environment Network. Theresa May was doing the main speech. And when she did her speech, she was talking again about how brilliant Britain is and the 2050 target we brought in and everything else. I got up immediately and said our 2050 was a load of rubbish. It's not just greenwash, it's hogwash. And then actually said, look, we've got to get 2030. I explained the science behind it. Amber Rudd then stood up and said, oh, Ed, we all agree that we need faster environmental action, but anybody who takes a 2030 target is not going to get elected at the next election. So that was it. It was simple political expediency and getting elected at the next election. It wasn't about showing true leadership on a topic that requires leaders to go out and say, A, this is what we must do, and then come and explain why we need to do it to take the electorate with them. They didn't want to do that. They just wanted to kowtow to what the electorate wants today without explanation and get themselves elected.
Well, joining me now is former XR spokesperson and Associate Professor of Philosophy, Rupert Read. He now runs the Climate Majority Project.
In the same week, Rupert Read was launching a parallel initiative. It was also designed to spread the climate message to the wider general public. So what's Rupert Read's take on the new Climate Party?
Well, I think it's a bold initiative. I think it's exciting. That's why we in the Climate Majority Project have decided to have a dialogue with Ed about this and invite him into various conversations. I think there are some pretty serious potential downsides. In particular, the thing that we've stressed to the Climate Party is that there is a risk in terms of electoral strategy, given that in the UK we mostly have the first-past-the-post system, the most undemocratic system for voting known in the whole world. There is an enormous premium on the Climate Party getting its targeting right, and in particular on it being actually the case that it does take away more conservative votes than votes for other parties. Otherwise it could end up net benefiting the Conservative Party, which of course of the existing parties right now is the worst of all on climate. So it's a bold and in some ways encouraging and smart initiative, but if it's carried out in the wrong way, it could disastrously backfire.
We're not worried about splitting the vote. We're here for climate, so we're here to get the right action in terms of from the point of view of climate and the environment, and we're also here to make sure Britain grabs the opportunity related to climate. So what we're not here to do is to help a particular party get into power. So we don't regard Labour or the Liberal Democrats, for instance, as a better alternative, when from a climate perspective it makes absolutely no difference if they get into power. It is a different issue in relation to the Green Party. We will not stand against the Green Party in places where we believe they have a credible chance of winning.
So I welcome the Climate Party. I welcome everyone who genuinely wants to save humanity. And I know the Green Party are the ones that I totally believe in for this at this point in time, because we're an established party. We've been around since 1973. We've had policies that are joined up and look at how things affect each other. This is how climate change is actually driven. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It's actually driven by the fossil fuel companies, the construction companies. You've got to remember that 8% of carbon is cement. And what's the biggest cement project in Europe? HS2. What HS2 are doing here in Ruislip Gardens, they are pushing through 2 very big bored tunnels. They are basically great big concrete monstrosities, and the bottom quarter of the tunnels sits in the chalk aquifer that filters the drinking water for London. You know, we have to address the pollution problems if we're going to address the climate problem. I think in general the public needs a better debate on climate and much more of the facts and the data available, because then I do believe people are intelligent, but they are driven by these simple slogans, and there are numerous people in this election who are standing on anti-climate change or even climate denying platforms.
The first thing to know about the IPCC reports is they are not written by scientists. It's a government operation, and the scientists who want to say things often get censored. That is a fact. And the scientific fact is, as in this pamphlet, and you can get it over there, that carbon dioxide levels over the last 20,000 years follow changes in temperature. They don't lead them. They do not cause them. The whole basis of the climate story is false. And the reason the laws are put forward are not to control climate, they are to control you.
The whole rubbish.
You can be a climate denier if you wish, but that's
No denial. It's a fact. It's a fucking fact. It's not a denial. It's a fact. No, it's a fact.
All of this net zero stuff, whether you believe in the climate change or not, this net zero stuff guarantees our children a poorer, worse, and nastier life than the one we had before us. And it is done to salve the consciences of people who fly into conferences and navigate their way around the democratic process via stuff like COP26. It completely circumvents democracy, and we should not look at data and graphs. We should not ignore the evidence of our eyes and ears, and we should give our children a better future than the one we had, not impoverish them in the way that we're choosing to do with ideological rubbish.
This is where we're all going, whether we like it or not, and whether we are the term climate denier, climate skeptic, worried about a slightly warming planet, or whether we actually accept that the tens of thousands of scientists who signed the Great Warnings to humanity, the hundreds that have written the IPCC reports might be correct. And let me just give you a suggestion. The sort of people that say the things that you have just said, do they go to their doctor, oh, by the way, a scientist, and then the doctor says to them, oh, for goodness sake, you know, you're going to die if you don't stop drinking and smoking. You know, I give you a year. And then you go, oh, hang on. No. I absolutely don't believe that. So when we're talking about climate skeptics, those are the people that say to the tens of thousands of scientists that write all of these reports to us, and we're going to say, oh, we don't believe you. It's all a hoax.
You're a fucking lot.
Let
him speak. You having a fucking lot.
Here in Britain, the current government does not have a single penny dedicated to public awareness raising around climate change educational public engagement. But the model that we can draw on, and very strong and recent in policymakers' minds, is of course COVID, where hundreds of millions were spent in Britain on generating public awareness and understanding of the issues, its causes, what people needed to do, and having conversations at all levels, both at a national level, but within the workplace, within the community on COVID. So we know we can do it. What they don't yet realize is how essential that is. But they're starting to get a sense of that, because when they try and put through the kind of policies we need to reach net zero, you start getting major pushback, because you have not primed the public with a sense of climate change as a major national issue and an urgent issue. And so people are fighting very much over the small-scale issues of how it affects their lives. So not surprisingly, they're saying, well, why are you telling me what to do with my house, with my car, with my life?
And getting me into politics.
It was just such a local issue that was hammered home by the climate skeptics among the candidates, ULEZ. The ultra-low emission zone is due to be extended by the London Mayor Sadiq Khan to the outer boroughs like Uxbridge. It's designed to cut traffic pollution and save lives.
In politics, the easy and lazy thing to do is try and be universally popular and duck the tough issues and kick the can down the road. I think the issue of climate change and air quality is an issue that deserves and demands addressing now. And so I could set a target for 2050 or 2060 or 2070. I could allow every year 4,000 people on average to die every year because of air quality issues, and children to have stunted lungs in perpetuity, and adults with a whole host of health issues from asthma, cancer, dementia, heart disease. Or I can take these tough actions.
And this ULEZ extension had been insisted upon by Grant Shapps himself, the Conservative Secretary of State for Energy and Net Zero. But the Tory candidate in Uxbridge saw an attack opportunity in changing sides. He made opposing ULEZ his only campaigning issue, fighting, he said, for the rights of local motorists. To dramatise the Climate Party's take on ULEZ, the team has come up with a pretty risky stunt.
So here we are on day 18 of our campaign in the by-election in Uxbridge and South Ruislip. So I've been going around talking to people in the street. And Bojo, you all right? What are you doing here?
This blasted poor quality air in Hillingdon. I just can't stand it.
Gosh, and it seems like it's really getting to you. Obviously, the ULEZ scheme has been coming in to put it right.
Well, yes, I do appreciate the cleaner quality air in the ULEZ area, which, of course, I invented in the first place. I came up with the idea.
Pretty controversial locally. There's a lot of people against it here. But I think it's partly because of the implementation. We need to make it work for people and small businesses. Let's take all that money, let's reapply it and help them transition to make sure it's not hurting Londoners, but looking after them. That's why we need real leaders. Right. We need real people at the top who are going to grip the biggest topics and actually say, I'm going to deal with ULEZ, even though it might be unpopular in the short term. I'm going to find a reason to persuade people why this is the right thing we need to do, and I'm not going to be politically expedient, just trying to get elected, like the current Labour candidate who's going against his party's wishes and saying he's against ULEZ, which is kowtowing again just to what he thinks the voter wants to hear.
Right, it is the final day of campaigning in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, and my chauffeur is very confident, aren't you?
I'm very confident.
Put a fox in the box tomorrow, come on.
Hello, Count Binface here, space politician and candidate to be the next MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip.
The only thing we need people here to know is actually know we even exist. They'd have to know nothing about us. If 60,000 people could name the Climate Party exists at the election, we've done the job.
No, I didn't know there was a Climate Party, no.
Oh, okay. Would you vote for them?
Maybe. I'd have to look at the key points and things, but yeah, maybe.
I want something completely different to Boris Johnson.
Right.
I thought people of Uxbridge would be really let down by Boris.
The climate issue, is that important to you?
It is important to me, but at the moment I think I'm going to have to go with someone who's got a chance of winning.
I'm a business owner, so ideally I should be supporting Conservative, but it's never the case. Climate Party, yeah, but I haven't got enough knowledge to actually comment on them.
I'm voting Green. You've got to vote Green, because if you vote any of the major parties, they're not dealing with the matters that we need dealt with. The Climate Party, yes, there's lots of people we agree with on a lot of things, but they're not local.
Labour.
Why?
I think that the Climate Party is more situated on actual environmental things and rather less than thinking about what the people need. So I think that it won't really have a chance.
I think in this by-election, I think number one thing is every single vote that comes to us is a success because somebody has decided to vote on the single topic of climate. So they've withdrawn their vote from everything else, every other topic and every other party to say climate is the one thing that's most important to me. In terms of voting success, I think if we ended up with a couple of thousand votes, that would be an enormous success. I'd be pretty unhappy if we got less than 50. But between 50 and 10,000, any level.
Gemmel, Edmund, John, commonly known as Ed Gemmel, Climate Party, 49.
Humanly speaking, initially immense disappointment, but then recognising the effect of the massive party machinery that was against us. 500 people in from outside the area to campaign for them and to do a lot on polling day as well. And that's a vast machinery, a lot of money. We have been very clear, though, about why we're in this. And we're in this to change people's perception, to change what people are going to be doing, and particularly to press those major parties to bring forward their targets on climate, both from a scientific point of view and from the commercial opportunity point of view. We haven't been going out to say that we're intending to get massive number of MPs in Parliament. That doesn't mean it's not an aim. What it means is the first thing we want to do is get those two parties, put pressure on them, get them to bring their targets forward. And the second thing is to change completely the media dialogue, the way people talk about it. We want people to talk about climate as the number one thing they talk about, not just from the point of view of the catastrophe that's coming if we don't act, but also the opportunity. And that very simple message that we were putting out on the street, which is 40 years we've been offshoring our industry. Here is this huge commercial opportunity coming, 149 countries already going in this direction, 92% of world GDP targeted on getting to net zero and towards sustainability. And that is so obvious that it's coming down the track. We should take advantage of it and get money back into the pockets of people in Britain and back into British industry.
Green, Sarah Shamian, Green Party, 893.
I thought it was a wonderful success for the Green Party. I came third out of 17 and was able to get my very local message about our local water supply and the terrible cost of HS2 across to everyone. And I really learnt a lot. I think that people want more conversation, but I'm confused about the Climate Party, because how can you change the way we are breaking down the climate without changing the way people are making money and hurting the earth and creating more and more pollution? In one way, Ed Gemmel is right that the climate is the pivotal issue. However, the things that are driving climate breakdown are the things that have to be stopped. And those are the things that are driving the economy today. I think it's a false argument to talk about growth as the way forward. We have to stop the growth in terms of destruction. Permanent growth has been based on exploiting natural resources, exploiting people, or exploiting the environment. We have to stop that. We have to stop putting growth as our God. We are inventive people as humans. We can come up with very different things, but we've got to get rid of the idea of permanent growth on a finite planet. It doesn't make sense. We maybe need much clearer principles that we can all work together to change the amount of pollution we're causing, the amount of harm we're doing to the environment, the amount we're not understanding different cultures, different people. You know, we're one species. We're on one planet. That's the future. And the Green Party stands for that.
Conservatives have held Uxbridge and South Ruislip. There was an expectation that...
The real shock of the night was the totally unexpected failure by the Labour Party to take the seat. A failure for which the leadership immediately blamed ULEZ.
I don't think there's any doubt that ULEZ was the reason that we lost the by-election in Uxbridge. And I have said we should reflect on this, including the mayor. I've spoken to him, as you would expect, and so there will be that reflection.
A little bloody nose for Labour. All they did is got pipped at the last moment in this election, and suddenly they want to row back on their environmental policies, and their weak leadership is not standing up and explaining why they need to move forward with this at greater pace, but why they want to row back on it.
I have said we should reflect on this, including the mayor.
Labour running scared after this by-election and saying that we're going to row back on the 28 billion that we may only see now in the second half of a Labour government. You've got Rishi Sunak talking about potentially abandoning green policies that are going to cost the consumer, relaxation on the petrol and diesel car banning for new cars by 2030, the phase out of gas boilers by 2035.
The Tories are gearing up to run a sort of anti-green campaign for the next general election, which will be at some point next year. And Keir Starmer is so weak, he is unwilling to stand up for not only his own party's policies in the abstract, but when his own party's mayor is introducing a policy, he's too cowardly to stand beside him and back that policy. And that is, you know, an extraordinary situation to be in. And that really terrifies me, because we're going into a general election, which the Tories have now said is going to, at least in a large part, be about climate change, and they're going to make it a kind of anti-green campaign. And the Labour Party, rather than standing on the side of, frankly, the majority of the country, which is very concerned about climate change, who are in favour of environmental measures, is so weak it's going to jettison all of that and talk about, as far as you can tell so far, basically nothing, in the hope that the broader anti-Tory sentiment for other reasons will mean that people will vote Labour anyway. And, you know, what we need in a time of looming climate crisis, of current climate crisis, is leaders who are willing to lead.
I think part of the opportunity for the general election is the coming together of people and feeling that they're all joined on a particular mission, whether that's in a constituency or on a national basis. What I heard on the doorstep, and I heard it regularly, it stunned me when I first heard it, was that people were saying, I would do it if my neighbour was doing it. I'd do it if we're all doing it. And I didn't get it to begin with the first dozen times I heard it, but by the 50th time I heard it, and this was during the council elections, I started to understand it. And it's very much like in COVID. Once we were all told to put our masks on, I'm not saying that some people didn't do it, but the majority of people did it. And why? Because they didn't want to let the team down. Because we're all on a team together, national mission or local mission, and we're all doing it together. And that's why people do stuff. That's why you need government legislation, council legislation, to bring these things in so that people can get behind it as a team, because most people want to do it if they think they're all in it together. And I think that can happen. So I think even under this electoral system, I believe that whether it's in my own constituency or in some of the others, we could do that. We could win seats, but it'll be that moment, that tipping point within the political process where people want to join the team because it looks like it's a winning team.
And Ed's not waiting. Unfazed by his disappointment in Uxbridge, he's already taking his message to High Wycombe, his own locality where he plans to stand for the Climate Party in the upcoming general election.
The reason for going our route, and obviously after getting a massive 49 votes, we are having a little look at this again, but the arguments that are going on now absolutely play into our existence. So the fact that the two main parties want to row back on climate action because they're scared on their votes and things, and then prominent members, particularly in the Conservatives, but even in Labour as well with Ed Miliband, are trying to push back on it, suggests that we're in exactly the right place at the right time. We should just send out an invitation to Zach Goldsmith, Chris Skidmore and Alok Sharma and Ed Miliband and Caroline Lucas to join us and say, come to us for one election. Just one election, that's it. So everyone comes in 8 to 12 months' time and it's the climate election. And then it's a case of, do people believe that or not? And if they do believe it, they come out and vote on the climate issue. And if they don't believe it, we're doomed. So after my dream with the boys, where they asked me what I did 20 years ago when I knew what was happening, and I now imagine myself 17 years in the future, answering them, I'll say, I put everything into it. Absolutely everything. I didn't worry about earning money or where the money came from. I didn't worry too much about my health. And I didn't worry about anything at all, except for getting it right for you in the future. And so that when eventually you looked me in the eye and asked me the question, I could say I gave it everything.
Fantastic. What an amazing film. And I think we're being joined by Peter and Anuradha, who are involved with the film.
Excellent.
Brilliant. Ed, thank you so much. That was really informative. Absolutely brilliant film. You want to follow on? Over to you, Ed.
Sure. I mean, I'll only say just a couple of things because it's probably a bit longer than you would have expected. Actually, I didn't realize it was quite so long myself. And people that want to ask questions. But I mean, the film gave you that flavour of what we're up against. And I think maybe I'll simply talk about that, what we're up against, and then let you come back with questions and I can go more deeply into what the Climate Party stands for, if you like. But if in that election, there were roughly 30,000 votes cast. 27,000 of them went to the two main parties, and less than 3,000 were split between 15 other candidates. You know, that's the scale of what you're up against politically in this country. The Conservatives put out 17 leaflets during the campaign. In 35 days, every second day, a leaflet hit the door, and Labour were almost the same. So that's the sort of thing that we're up against in our electoral system in the UK. And although Sarah was talking about the Greens doing so well coming third, the Greens dropped off 700 votes from their general election number of votes. So although they actually did quite well coming third, and percentage-wise probably did relatively well compared to before. Their actual vote dropped off, so Greens didn't come out to vote for them. The Liberal Democrats went down from 2,500 in the general election to 500. You know, I mean, that was just the scale of the pressure that the Conservatives and Labour managed to put on. Now, I'll give you the one other observation from it, is that Labour lost it at the moment that their candidate, Danny Beale, said, "I'm against ULEZ." Because at that moment, a whole lot of voters who would have voted for Labour probably went, no integrity, no backbone, I just can't be bothered coming out to vote. And there would be a bunch of others who were actually pro-ULEZ in the Labour Party who would simply come out and voted Green. So I suspect several hundred of them simply voted for the Green Party. So I think that was the moment when literally they lost the election rather than the Conservatives winning it. The other thing is, on the doorstep for the first 2.5 weeks, it was about a 3.5 week campaign, really. First 2.5 weeks, ULEZ wasn't really talked about. It was all about crime and police when you were on the doorstep. It was the #1 issue. And then in the last week, it was ULEZ, because the Conservatives had rammed it down everyone's throats. And Labour had capitulated, of course, and joined them, such that the whole thing was about ULEZ. So it really, really became a single issue at the end, but it wasn't at the beginning. It was people were duped. And another bit on the Conservatives, but it's not just them, they put out several of these local newspapers. They just look like local newspapers. You know, it would be called the Uxbridge Times or something. Didn't say it came from the Conservatives, except right down in teeny weeny print that was in grey colour, not even in black, so that it melded in with the background of the newspaper. And they put it out. Now, they're not the only ones, because the other major parties have done it in other parts of the country. But that was very insidious that you saw these papers coming out that people wouldn't have immediately recognised as being from a party. And of course, inside it was all about how great the Conservative candidate was, how brilliant a councillor he was, which he may or may not be, I don't know, and ULEZ. So it was really extraordinary.
Absolutely brilliant. Really illustrates some of the British political process there through the film. If anyone's got a question here for Ed, if you want to either use the reactions thing down the bottom, or there's, or we can just stick your hand up in the old way like that. Anything people want to check there? One thing maybe I was saying, Tim over there has got a question. Tim, Sunny Lincoln, over.
Yeah, that was really interesting, Ed. Yeah, thanks for coming on and doing that. I mean, I'm 100% with you on this idea that, you know, if you give people the facts and how with COVID, people adapted to what they need to do. And you said most people join with a sort of joint consensus that we've got to do all in this together to protect our society and whatever. And I'm 100% behind that. And I think you're right. We need leadership. We need the information. And at the moment, people aren't being told the truth, even though they see it on the screens every day. You know, as you intimated there, the massive sort of disaster we're seeing across the planet. Also pick up on what Sarah was saying. So, I mean, you were talking about being net zero by 2030. Now, do you see that can happen under the existing economic system of, as Sarah hinted there, you know, this idea of continual economic growth on a finite planet? And a lot of people say, you know, whether it's David Attenborough, a lot of climate scientists, you know, we cannot continue with this. So do you see that to get there and that we need to reduce and we need to adapt and move away from GDP, economic growth as a way, you know, which none of our parties at the moment are talking about?
Yeah, I mean, let me just, the comments were great, so I'll just deal with the last issue that you raised. There is a different question if we are talking about whether we can have never-ending consumptive growth with a never-ending growing population on a finite planet. But let's bring it back to just Britain. And let's take growth as also being able to be financial, as in, you know, GDP, not piles of stuff growing, but financial growth. So we'll talk about that, but then let's take a side issue on the way the Green Party has been talking about degrowth for years. They've been at the political process for 50 years. and we have one MP in Parliament, and they've just taken over their first local council, as in, majority control. And that's after 50 years. So that message is clearly not resonating enough to drive fast political action when we know that the climate crisis is a yesterday, tomorrow, next 5 years action level. Now we come back to the theory. Somebody is going to make money out of solving climate change. Somebody makes money from doing renewables, doing wind power, whatever it would be. Somebody makes money from ecotech. Somebody makes money from green bonds. Somebody makes money from financial advising in the city on ESG. People are making money. And at the moment, the people that are making, or the country that's making the most money is China, because they make most of the wind turbine parts. They make most of the solar panel parts. They make, I think it's 88% of the batteries. They control already large chunks of the rare earth metals and other minerals and things we need for these processes, and they process even more of them. So they've got control over 30, 40, 50% of cobalt lithium, and then they're processing even more. So actual control of the supply line, they have an even greater control. They are making vast amounts of money, and we get sidetracked when we worry about their emissions and everything else. I'm not saying it's not important, but we do get rather sidetracked, and the right-wing media use that as a reason why we should not be doing anything. Now, they're making money from it because we're not, because we decided to outsource all of our production of the things we just talked about, but also everything else to them. So they're making the emissions. Our emissions are supposedly going down, but we're not making any money because we don't make very much. Since I think it's 1973, or the 1970s, let's say, when 25 to 30% of our GDP came from manufacturing, it's down under 10%. And you heard me say in the film, it's very obvious that financially the world is going towards dealing with net zero. Whether they go 2030, 2050, 2070, sort of irrelevant. That's the direction of travel. And you can be a climate denier and see the economic opportunity of doing it. So what we need to do is, as a country, forget the global picture for a minute, because people are going to vote for the Climate Party because of what we're going to be doing in the UK. Let us get at the front of the new clean industrial revolution. Let's take a 2030 target because it puts us at the front. 2050 puts us at the back with everybody else. The Germans have got 2045. There's a couple of other countries at 2040 and earlier. We need to bring it forward to 2030. That's twice the time we had to reorganize the economy during the war. It's 7 times the time we had during COVID. During the war, there were ships that were being made prior to the war in, I think it's 243 days, the Liberty ship. In the middle of the war, 42 days on average, and they made one of them in 4.5. That's the scale of achievement that you can create if you target it and make it the national mission and go for it. And we're big enough, strong enough, and we've got the city that's good enough for financing it, and they're ready to do it. So I do believe that we can do it, but look at it as financial growth, a realigning of what we are valuing and paying for, rather than purely dirty consumptive growth.
Okay.
That's very good. Very good points made there. We need to bring, the green industrial revolution in this country on a lot of things, and fund the jobs for the green transition. I had a couple of things there. I mean, if anyone else got a question, stick your hand up. But 2 things there on kind of policy. One was, tell us a little bit, I think in talking to you before, you were saying you were targeting, particularly for the Climate Party at the next election, any climate kind of denier MPs, particularly going to their constituency. So a little bit about that strategy. And the other one is, I know there was a women's party that ran at some elections and was very successful at actually, although, they're a small party like yourselves, they actually managed to influence the main big parties they put a lot of campaign policy things in there to improve things for women's rights, and then the bigger parties started to take them on because they saw that gradually the women's party was getting more votes. So do you think that's part of your strategy, that if they see that gradually more people vote for the Climate Party, they might start to take on more climate policies on the bigger parties? Over.
Right, and I did see Eleanor, if Eleanor's there, her comment about ULEZ as well. So so I'll also comment about that in a minute. In fact, let me deal with the ULEZ one first.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah,
the general one, which is more general. So Eleanor, what we did during the campaign actually is, because we were consistently being said every time somebody heard it was Climate Party, they went, clearly you're for ULEZ, and we went, well, we do think it's a good idea, as do most people, to have less pollution, cleaner air, you know, less cars on the streets. And everybody would nod sagely. And then we'd say, but we don't agree about how it's been, you know, instigated. So what we would do, I said it on TV, and we wrote an official letter to the mayor saying, why don't you bring it in over 5 years, have £2.50 in the first year, not £12.50. So it's not negligible, but it, you know, it's much lower, and then grade it up over 5 years to the point it gets to £12.50. Also take all of the money that you're getting on it and reapply that to look after the vulnerable. And whether that's individuals and their cars who don't have very much money, or whether that's small businesses or the, you know, the single man with his white van. So all of the money goes to it. So from a point of view of perspective of people looking at it, you don't look like you're trying to siphon off money to anybody. And by having it at £2.50 and bringing it up over 5 years, you don't have the cliff edge that it goes off, which saw a spike in the value of cheap hybrid and electric vehicles and compliant vehicles. So my little Nissan Leaf, you know, it went up for about 2 months from being £5,000 to £7,000 instantly, because we're in, you know, shouting distance of London. So if we did that, it would be brought in, people wouldn't have been so upset, and then it would have moved forward and probably been successful. Let's see how it gets to now. Okay, on the other issues, on the other parties and the pressure, the first thing to say is we're out looking for candidates now. So, and in fact, a sort of preface of that, the way we would like to find candidates would be through community groups would be ideal, which would actually mimic to some extent what was done with the teal independents in Australia that were supported by a group called Climate 200. So independent groups, a little bit like climate emergency centres, people came together and they said, we don't think our local MP speaks for us. So we'd like to have an independent voice, but somebody who majors in climate speaking on our behalf. And these community groups went out and looked for candidates in most cases, rather than the other way around. In terms of smaller parties, we can also join with smaller parties in the sense we can stand joint candidates. We are talking to some of the other parties as well, because we are essentially independent in our view on everything except climate and biodiversity crisis. You know, that's where we have the inverted commas, the whip, from the point of view of you understand how the other parties make their candidates and their MPs do what they want them to do. And we're effectively only on that do people have to hold the line. Then we're open to a wide range of views on other things. So effectively an independent view, but we wouldn't be against people having views similar to Labour or to the Conservatives, so long as they hold the line on climate. We're single issue. We're out there to get the action we need on climate. So for instance, with the Women's Party as an example, in a place where they have a candidate, there will be no problem in them being Women's Party / Climate Party. And that is allowed under the electoral process in the UK. And you all know of Labour and the Cooperative Party, which is the most famous example of it. And so that in terms of smaller parties, in terms of strategy, the strategy is to put pressure on the two big parties, particularly to take 2030 as their target. And backstop on that is if they don't take 2030, but they move all of their intentions forward and their policies forward and they're more ambitious, we've already started to win ground, but the aim is to get them to take 2030. Second aim is to change the way we talk about it in the media. We've talked about it for the last 2 or 3 decades as it's an emergency, there's a really big problem, act now, invest money, less catastrophe. Yes, it's got a whole lot of us doing stuff, but it hasn't got the centre and the right moving in big way. It has had some, of course, but there's a whole lot who haven't, because people in politics, people in elections, and I don't know who would have said this, but there's a famous person who did, but vote on money. You know, they vote for what makes their life better in money terms. And it's not just greedy, you know, rich people. It's also the single mum with 5 kids who's struggling to put food on the table for the last week of the month. And if we can get another £100 into her pocket, you know, that's going to be good for her life and good for her kids. And that's not greed. So money really matters. And then prosperity in the wider sense of sort of well-being and health are important. So we want to put pressure on them on those big issues, but bring it back to the fact that if we move early, team effort, invest our time and money now, it's great for Britain in the future, and we'll all be more prosperous. We'll finally have money to pay for the NHS and the police and the social services, and we won't have to steal it one pot to put it into the other, because we'll be making money.
Very good, Ed. Lovely. It's good to hear. Coming over to Alan there in Humber, who's in the middle of the Humber Eco Festival over 4 counties, I believe. Over.
Brilliant.
4 local authorities, yes, with 100 events happening in the next 21 days. And it's all volunteers, and there's no funding just because people want to do it.
Brilliant.
Anyway, enough about that. I had a question, and that was, you were saying about joint parties. I think you used the example of the Women's Party / Climate Party.
Yeah.
So what's to stop it being the Green Party / Climate Party?
The Green Party is.
So.
Sorry, I was slightly facetious there on purpose. It could be the Green Party / Climate Party. There isn't a problem with that. I mean, I don't think the Green Party would agree to it. I'm not saying no. You know, if we had somebody come to us and say Green Party / Climate Party, the point is we would not do it with anybody who is not taking our climate demands, let's say, and our climate policies as number one. You know, the rest of the Green Party's things, much as we regard them as a big distraction from the big issue, somebody can come and hold those views. That's absolutely fine as their independent view, so long as they hold the line on climate and biodiversity crisis. So in principle, there is nothing wrong with us standing a candidate who's Green Party / Climate Party, Lib Dem / Climate Party, you know, or even Labour or Conservative / Climate Party.
A moment ago, it was just Climate Party, but then in that sentence you said climate / biodiversity. And of course, that could be climate / biodiversity, soil health, water health, pollution, and then it would be the Green Party.
Okay, no, it wouldn't, because the Green Party is also social housing, nationalisation, anti-Brexit, LGBTQ, and every other thing you could bring in. We're not. So we're absolutely not the Green Party. Not that people shouldn't have a view on those important issues. That's not the point. That is up to people to have a view. And on some of them, I might have a view. But we are out to get the right action on the climate and biodiversity crisis. And that's it. Mm-hmm. And we want it done both scientifically and commercially.
Thank you for that.
Very good. I think lively discussions.
Yeah, I've got
Eleanor,
a question.
I think, had a question.
So have I.
So Eleanor, then Habiba. Eleanor.
Hi there. Hello.
Hi, Eleanor.
Thanks for talking with us, and the film's all really interesting. I just wondered, what sort of mix would you like to see then for the economy? I guess I'm wondering, is it all industry and finance? Because green jobs are also care work, creativity, public services, and you did mention that. But the financial part, the money from that doesn't necessarily get redistributed, and it creates debt, and the debt creates the bigger need to create more and more stuff and more contracts and commitments. So that is growth in itself. I was just wondering what the vision was, and it's a really difficult vision. It's not like anyone's got the right answer, so
sure,
or the right balance. So.
Yes, I think where we are now, because this is a sort of topic we could talk about for an hour on its own, actually. But at the top line, the whole vision is get the right target in order to get us launched, which is bring it forward to 2030. We're going to decarbonize by 2030. Let's get on with the job. By doing that, we unleash the opportunity for the city in terms of finance to start financing it. And in very simple terms, the next day, you make that business that was an environmental targeted business, whether it's renewables or ecotech or something, worth a lot more money because we've now got to get to 2030 decarbonisation. Now, in sense of talking about social services, care workers, and all of the other plethora of other people and areas where we need to invest money, it's more of a macro economic outlook. So at the moment, we don't have enough money to invest in all these things. It's a different argument as to whether we think they are invested in the right things. And in a sense, the big parties are pulling forward policies about where they invest the money, but they don't have enough. So they're going to pull it from somewhere and put it somewhere else. And that's sort of what they're looking at. What we're saying is we get a national mission to go out and lead the world in what's a new industrial revolution, not smokestacks, but the new clean tech, which has to come anyway. By doing that, we get the opportunity to export our manufactured products and services, which are now decarbonized and sustainable, to the rest of the world that then is on a path to go there, although they'll be on a slower one than us. By doing that, we end up changing our balance of payments. In other words, at the moment, we import more stuff, goods and services together, than we export. And so every year we effectively lose money. We create a trade deficit in the UK. And what we're trying to do at the macro level is to say, by focusing on this big opportunity, we reverse that. We start to have a positive inflow of money into the country. We stop having to finance debt. You may have been talking about individual debt or whatever, but debt for the country, of course, costs us vast amounts of money in terms of interest. And we have more money then to invest in the things we all need. So it's very much for the money rather than the individual details on it.
Okay, I think we've got a quick question there for Habiba, and then from
Hi.
Julian.
I just wanted to. I hope you can all hear me.
Sure.
It's been
Hi, Habiba.
an intriguing and wonderful discussion. But this caravan thing. So if people have to travel at night, that means there'll be roads full. People have to work at campsites all night long. That needs to be brought up at some point, I think.
I mean, I'm not quite sure, Habiba, if you have a question for me, or you were just meaning that's important.
I was just bringing it to an important issue, sort of
Okay.
thing.
All right, thank you, Habiba. Nice one. That's good to raise awareness. Julian, you had a feedback, comment, or question there?
Yeah, just a quick thanks.
Swindon, Bristol.
Thanks. Yeah, great that you're sort of raising the profile of climate. Interesting that you go to create a party in this way and find it was the best way. That's great. I presume you're sort of supporting PR, and I'm interested to know what your strategy and marginal seats are, and who.
Sorry, can I just say, I can't see your mouth, but I think you just said supporting PR.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
right. And what your strategy is in marginal seats, and how you would play that to make sure that you get the result that you want.
Okay, the PR one is, look, definitely in support of a form of PR. I mean, I think the preferential vote system in Australia is brilliant. And if we had a preferential vote system here, and effectively, for anybody who doesn't know it, you've got 10 candidates, you mark them 1 to 10 in descending order, and each time they go through calculating who's winning, a bit like they're doing in one of the presidential races internationally at the moment, you just knock out the bottom candidate, and then you reallocate their votes. So everybody's vote eventually counts. So it's a preferential vote system, and that swept in 7 new independents in Australia who were all taking climate as their first policy. So that would be brilliant. We aren't going to get it here in the time that we need in order to solve the climate problem. The carbon budget for 1.5 degrees, based on the IPCC's conservative estimates, runs out in 2028. So we've got one election, maybe 1.5, if you think a little bit can be done at the next one. I think it's probably too late to do the big stuff. So we've got one election. There isn't PR now. It's pretty unlikely there will be at the next one. I don't waste any sleep on it. That doesn't mean I don't support it if there was an opportunity to bring it in. So then you talked a little bit about electoral strategy. And Phoenix asked earlier on. So our aim, and this is all about getting enough candidates and having enough money. You don't have candidates, you have people coming forward to stand who are any good, and you don't have any money, you can't do it. But in a perfect world, our aim is to stand around 110 candidates in the coming election. That's to target the 100 most marginal seats of the 2 main parties. How we do that now with this incredibly fluctuating polling system and these recent by-election results, every time we calculate who those 100 seats are probably going to be, it looks different 2 months later on. But to try and go to the marginal seats, and in addition, to take on all the climate deniers. And there's 19 Conservatives in the Net Zero Scrutiny Group that was started by Steve Baker, and the chairman is Craig McKinley in Thanet. I'm taking on Steve Baker, who happens to be my local MP, and quite a few of the press have said, that looks very exciting to have the leader of the climate party against the country's #1 climate skeptic. And then we're looking now for a good candidate in Thanet. Then we want to stand against all of the climate deniers, and we have a couple of Labour MPs as well that we've suggested are effectively climate deniers that we should target as well. So as Phoenix said, they're our first target if we can get the money and find the right people to stand. And then otherwise it's marginal constituencies as much as we can, so that Labour and the Conservatives look at us and go, look, if these guys get 10 votes or 1,000, they could cause a problem for us. And then the pressure is on them to go to Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak and say, bring forward our climate targets and we'll get these guys to stand down. And we will. If
Are you working with MP Watch? Sorry, go ahead.
MP Watch, yes. I mean, I know them. When you say working with, I know them well. I'm in the original group of the Steve Baker Watch. I'm not the founder. So Gemma, who's a good friend locally, is let's say the original initiator of it. But I'm in one of the group that she brought in, sort of to advise her and help her later on. And they're generally doing a great job. I mean, the Steve Baker Watch, it's a weekly thing in the local press with Steve and the group sort of slugging it out in terms of comments. And then I'm in touch with the people on the national one as well. So, and I've come to a few meetings and things to talk to them.
All right, I think we've got a hand up there. Probably our last question of the night from the University Challenge panel from around the UK, around the world. Asat Pillai, would you like to make a comment or a question? Over.
Sure, thank you. I got an invite from Linda to attend this, so I thought I'll come along.
Hi, Sat.
Hi everyone. Hi Phoenix. So basically, my question is which is, there's already a lot of polarization and antagonism between different camps within any issue, be it Brexit or climate or whatever. Do we need more antagonism and them and us, and labeling other people climate deniers or tree huggers? Should we not try and be less antagonistic and less partisan and less polarizing, and persuade others to work together in some sense and find common ground and consensus, rather than label each other different colors? That's it.
In terms of what we should do and what would be the perfect world, the answer is yes, yes, and yes. In terms of where we are, I think we're a long way from it. The logic, let's say, behind that, first thing is the two main parties, all they want to do is to get to power. And you can see the cynical way that Rishi Sunak is changing policies at the moment. It's just about getting back into power, not caring about the rest of us, or really about the country, or about individual people or sectors of the population. Just get me back into power. Labour is almost the same. The fact that when the Conservatives go swing harder to the right, it just allows Labour to swing more into the centre or towards the centre-right themselves. And in fact, they are not coming down hard and saying they're against some of the things that Rishi Sunak said. So we see Rosebank Oil coming in. They're not coming down hard saying we'll reverse it straight away. They're just saying we leave it as it is. Okay, on the polarisation specifically, where we have been up until the climate party has been on basically every time we got onto the news as climate activists, we would be hammered with what about China? Why are you blocking the road? Why are you doing this? And we at the so GB News, Talk TV, a lot of the press would take that attitude. And to try and draw away from it is to find something where actually there could be pretty much a consensus amongst everybody. And that's what we're trying to do, because the real aim is that big 60% in the center, as you heard me say in the film, and then the right as well. But it's that 60% in the center. And it's saying to that 60% is, you're all worried about climate change, even though you haven't really got very motivated to do anything yet, because that comes out in all the polls. You'd like us to do something. Yeah, okay. Right, well, we don't have to do it. We're being told by the more extreme right wing, that generally the climate skeptics, that are saying, why should we do it if China doesn't do it? We're only 1% of global emissions. Actually, we're 2% if we take our imports, but we're only a small amount of emissions, and China's such a big percentage. They're doing a new coal-fired power station every week. And when that's said to me, and there was a Lawrence Fox interview before he got thrown off GB News about 2 months ago, And he said this to me, and I said, Lawrence, don't look at this in an altruistic sense. Your suggestion is that we should give up stuff. We should pay for other people. We should do all this stuff when China's not doing it, and we're going to lose out. Actually, it's the opposite. We're losing out to China at the moment. They're making all the money from it. And Britain could be coming forward as a nation with a national mission, making the money and the jobs and the opportunities here. And that's something we can all get behind. And everybody wants that. It doesn't matter whether you're Labour, Conservative, Green Party even. I'm not saying they want growth, but they do want jobs and opportunity in the UK. Certainly the Lib Dems. Everybody effectively is behind that, with the exception of the consumptive growth discussion. But we would all like Britain to have more money and more opportunity to do the things it wants to do and prosperity for people. So it seems to be that that's less polarizing than where we were before we existed. At least that's what I hope.
Nice. I think we do need to find common ground, and we need to get on with the cooperation for the green jobs transition for a better future. I think I remember the end of the Bonn Climate Summit, there was a big launch of a group calling for solutions that they could make profit and make funds from, really. And we need to gear up for cooperating on this big green transition very, very, very fast, and funding solutions. I think that's about all we've got time for this lively debate, particularly towards the end, folks. Lively discussion. Thank you very much for coming. Next week we
Phoenix, can I just say just one thing just before we finish?
Definitely. We'll come back over to it, Ed, just to finish. Yeah, go for it. All
right, it was just a quick one. So thank you very much for having me here, and great to see everybody. Thank you again to Peter and Anuradha for doing the film that they did before, which, as I said, is their work, not ours. We didn't influence it. They did it, the way they wanted to do it. To say to everybody that we are interested across the whole country to find candidates. So if any of the climate emergency centres have people there, people they know, people they can recommend, that would be absolutely great. And also happy to come and do talks. I mean, missing the other side of the country is difficult, but to local groups, or potentially if I'm in different areas, to come and help and do talks to people locally and in real life, if it helps out, just let me know.
Brilliant. If you want to put that down into a short version, we could put it in the email out that you could come and do talks, or groups can get involved in some way. We need to shake up the British political landscape. It's been a 2.5 horse race for way too many decades, and we need to change the whole system. So thank you very much to Ed for coming tonight and stimulating that debate and working to change the political landscape. We need a quake to change things, shall we say. Thank you everyone very much for coming. Next week, we have Paul O'Connor from undercurrents.org, who done 30 plus years of frontline video activism, telling us about 30 years of learnings from many, many different movements and how to put it across in video and improve your movement, your campaign, your project. I think that's about it. Thank you very much, guys. I'm going to stop the recording, but if you want to just say anything as the part out, let me just end the recording. Thank you very much to Ed, the Climate Party, and all those who struggle for change all over. Stopping the recording.